religion and the environment. We're in our 5th iteration of the series now. I'm very excited to welcome 2 guests from the Unitarian Universalist tradition to share their wisdoms with us today. So I don't want to take up too much time here, but again, as folks are just getting in and getting settled, we're expecting a larger crowd today. So please make sure you keep yourself on mute. We are recording, so if you don't want your face on camera, you can just go ahead and turn your screen off. But otherwise, we welcome you to engage and participate. The way that we are going to collect questions today is via the chat function. So as our 2 presenters are speaking and as we move into our time for Q&A and panel conversation, if questions are rising up for you, we would invite you to utilize the chat function to put your questions there. And also for today's conversation, we are asking that if you are a person who holds a marginalized identity, and that is up to you to self-define, if that is the case for you, you may asterisk your question in the chat. We don't need you to justify it or explain it to us, but you can go ahead and asterisk your question, and we will be prioritizing asterisk questions today. So thank you for being here. If you're eating your lunch or you've got your hot cup of tea or coffee, that's what I have here with me. And so I am very, very, very excited to have you all here. Our first speaker today, I am very delighted to welcome Reverend Dr. Kate Walker, who is the serving pastor at First Unitarian Church of Pittsburgh since August of 2021. Previously, she served the Mount Vernon Unitarian Church in Alexandria, Virginia, and the Meadville Unitarian Universalist Church in Meadville, Pennsylvania. She was raised Unitarian Universalist and is a double UU preacher's kid. She has several academic degrees you can ask her about, but she says those are quite boring to list. She lives in Pittsburgh with her husband Mark and 2 deeply loved Springer Spaniels. She is an outdoor enthusiast, frequently found hiking, skiing, sailing, biking, and staring at the sky while thinking about absolutely nothing at all. If you were here for our annual conference at the end of last year and you were at our Pittsburgh location, you had the great joy of hearing from her already, but for many others of us, she is new, and so we welcome her here today. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Kate.
Thank you, Katie. Delighted to see you all, either in a box or with your photo or your name, or actually see you. Wave at me. I would love to see you. And great. And I want to recognize my colleague over there, Reverend Joan at UU Justice PA, and delighted to see you. So I'm going to dive right in, and this is, I'm going to share my screen here. This is maybe new, even for those of you who self-identify as Unitarian Universalists. I'm going to look at who we are and the basic tenets of who we are, but I'm going to do it from a future perspective, in that ordinarily when I'm introducing somebody or a group to Unitarian Universalists, I might begin with our principles. But Unitarian Universalists are in a time of transformation, a time of change, as we really look at the future and who we're serving in the 21st century. So what I'm going to review is what we have as what we're now calling our values. We're literally in the midst of a major bylaws change. So, and my friend over there, Brian, will reference the principles later, which is what we're shifting from. But this is future oriented and our values. So real basic Unitarian Universalists. Perhaps you've heard of us and you've been wondering, perhaps you've dabbled in us or you're longtime members. We, Unitarian theologically just means one God. That's historically what it means, one God as opposed to the Trinity. And our faith has really emerged hundreds and hundreds of years ago around a reaction to the Trinity. I won't go into deep dive there, but theologically, it means Unitarian, means one God. And Universalist theologically means all are saved, that the idea that God is too good to love, to condemn anybody at all. And they started as 2 separate denominations that merged in 1961. Our headquarters are in Boston, and it is now called the Unitarian Universalist Association. Here in the 21st century, we are truly a multi-faith community. Well, we came out of Judeo-Christianity. We are a faith that embraces all theological constructs as long as we find agreement and covenant around certain values. And that's where we're going now. So that is the symbol, is a flaming chalice with 2 circles representing Unitarian Universalists. And you may have seen that about, and we like to wear it in our jewelry, put it on our bumper, and we light a chalice at the beginning of our worship services. This is what I'd like you to know about us as Unitarian Universalists. And this is just so you know that this is the piece that is changing right now as we speak. We covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritage of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. And love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. So you may be asking, how does a church work together that has multiple faiths? We may have Christians, we may have people who are humanists, we may have pagans, we may have lots of theists and lots of generics, I don't knows. We may have Jews. We have a lot of people who just are still trying to figure it out, but we focus around love. This is the graphic that I'm going to be pulling out of, and you will see love at the center and then 6 circles around. I'm going to draw your attention most to that first one, interdependence. Interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence with reverence for the great web of life and with humility. We acknowledge our place in it. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. From the lens of the question posed today from Interfaith Power and Light, we are and very much committed to caring for the earth through the lens of environmental justice or climate justice. For Unitarian Universalists, our commitment to the earth and all existence goes back deep to our roots, including the Transcendentalists as part of our theological constructs. So the next value is pluralism. We celebrate that we were all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another. In our free and responsible search for truth and meaning, we embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. The value of justice. I'm moving around on that circle. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and in society at large. And this one, of course, is particularly important as we are all looking at issues in our democratically committed country. Transformation. We adapt to the changing world. Oh, we could have a whole conversation about that. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete, never perfect. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. Again, that idea of relationships of interdependence and mutuality feed into our commitment to environmental justice. Equity. We could declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. Now, those are those 6 areas that center around the focus of love, but we also draw from inspirations, and we like to make clear what those are, because a lot of people ask, do we have a Bible? We do not. We enjoy reading from all of the religious scriptures of the world, but we primarily direct experience of the transcending mystery and wonder are primary sources of Unitarian Universalist inspiration. These experiences open our hearts and renew our spirits and transform our lives. We draw upon and are inspired by sacred, secular, and scientific understandings that help us to make meaning and live into our values. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which these sources were created and are currently practiced. Grateful for the experiences that move us, aware of the religious ancestries we inherit, and enlivened by the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. We are committed to inclusion, as vast systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. This is so important to know people's stories. We pledge to replace such barriers with ever widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. We strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons who share our values. We commit to being an association of congregations that empowers and enhances everyone's participation, especially those with historically marginalized identities. And finally, the one thing that really grounds us is a congregational freedom and the individual's right of consciousness are central to our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Congregations may establish statements of purpose, covenants, and bonds of union so long as they do not require that members adhere to a particular creed. So if I haven't said this directly, we are a non-creedal, non-dogma based church, but we believe that action begins on common ground, and that would be the earth. And when we begin our questions, I want Katie at some point to ask me what jet pig means. I know. So there we go. Interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice surrounded on the commitment of love. And I don't know how much time I have. I probably used it all, but I'm going to turn that over maybe to Brian.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Kate, for walking us through the richness of your tradition and some of the ways that you all are reimagining and shifting in today's context, and for kind of setting up some of the space between the values and the principles. So now I'm very excited to introduce Brian Dugas. Brian Dugas was born in the state of Maine and attended the University of Southern Maine. He has a previous career in law enforcement and medical fields, including serving time in the U.S. Army as an officer and in various leadership positions around the globe. After departure from active duty, Brian worked in the field of education in northeastern Pennsylvania as both a teacher and a principal. In 2018, Brian served for 2 years in Tanzania, East Africa with the Peace Corps, and then a year in Delaware with the AmeriCorps. Brian is currently the president of the Board of Trustees at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Wyoming Valley and serves on various boards and committees throughout the northeastern Pennsylvania region. He is married and has 3 children, and so he is here today to share a little bit more with us about the work that his community has been doing. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Kate, for doing such a good job at doing the heavy lift of explaining UUs. I will just talk about really what we're doing in our church. And I'm going to have you run the slides. Sweet. So our congregation is a small lay-led congregation, established in 1990, but we purchased a church in 2010. And next slide, please. And so, I mean, Reverend Kate did a great job of summarizing the principles and where we're going in the future. But our 7 principles that we follow basically just describe how we treat each other in commitment to truth and meaning and the democratic process, and we live by those. Next slide. And she mentioned this, no dogma. We do have a Christian fellowship, a pagan group, and a Buddhist group. What I really liked and what I was drawn to and what many others are drawn to in our congregation is that UUs have always been very active in social justice activities and especially environmental activities. Next slide. So these are the 7 principles. These are the first 3. Inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, compassion, and human relations, and acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Next slide. And a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And number 7 is the one that I sort of focus on when I'm talking about our environmental initiatives, respect for the interdependent web of existence for which we are part. A core component of our church, and I'm going to show you why. Next slide, please. So we purchased this church. We struggled for a long time about whether we wanted to bring in a church or a minister. And we went back and forth about it. Finally, we decided on a church, but then we had to decide on what type of church. We found facilities that were in the city, which we could have been an urban church, and we also found this church way out here on the edge of the world. It's actually right next to a state park. All of that land around the building right there is state park land, so it will never be grown in. And we had a really big debate in the congregation about, where we wanted to go and what the future was going to be. This is maybe 5 miles out, so it's certainly not an urban church. And we had to make that conscious decision, and we did. Next slide, please. And this road right here, right in front of our church, leads straight into the state park. Down at the end of that road, the only building down there is the park ranger's house. And so there will never be any development around our church, and we know that. And so we sort of committed in 2010 that we'd make sure that environmentalism is a core component of our church. Next slide. And of course, we walked down into the state park. That's Francis Slocum State Park. And of course, Francis Slocum was supposedly, the story goes, taken hostage by Native American tribes, and they spent the night in that little shelter that's up there. So we walk down after church, before church, have hikes on weekends and things like that. It's really our own little state park. Next slide. But we wanted to do more. And so we created a green team, and we had to sit down and make decisions about where we wanted to go with it. And these were our general plan: reconnect with nature, learn about environmental issues, build resilience, connect with other organizations in the community, and to get active, to start doing things. This Northeast PA seems to be a little bit behind the rest of the world in its environmental initiatives. And there's a lot of things that's happening up here. There's Marcellus Shale, there's other things. So taking action and getting busy was our plan. And next slide. So we put our plan into place, build a playground and labyrinth to get the kids outside and get the people outside, open the labyrinth up to other congregations, whoever wants to come up and use it, grow our own food and learn how to preserve it. Build a community garden in partnership with other organizations, and heating and air conditioning with our solar panel installation and a celebration. Next slide. So here we go. The first one was the playground, and this was really just getting organized and figure out how to fundraise and working together to build this. And we did. That was the first step. Next slide. And the second step was the labyrinth. Took quite some time to do this. We did it all internally, and we looked at the maps ourselves and laid the stones and things like that. And we invite everybody to come use it. Next slide. And the raised bed. So we wanted to start growing right off, and decided that we would build a raised bed next to the church. And so there's our two of our congregation members out there doing the work. Next slide. And a little bit further on, we got it done. We planted tomatoes. We decided our first crop would be tomatoes, and that we would take those tomatoes and we would learn how to can and do some canning together. Next slide. And there's our tomato garden. It actually got out of control. I don't know if you had gardens this last year, but it was a very wet year, and tomatoes were everywhere. People were growing them at home too. We had more tomatoes at the end of this than we knew what to do with. Next slide. And of course, we had our tomato canning exercise. We had some people that were experts, had the right equipment, and we came in together on one day and worked together to do the canning. It's quite a process. I've never done it before. Learned a lot. Next slide. and came up with, I think it was 32 cans of, I guess they're called cans, no, jars. I guess they're called jars of tomato sauce. So we did it together. We worked together and we actually took this project, and all we wanted to do was start small and to build from there. And that is the same thing that we're doing with our next project that was on that list there. Next slide, please. And that is Hillside Farms. So I don't know if you've ever been up to Northeast PA, but this is a little community building. It's really an educational facility. They grow their own crops. They have animals there. People come there for education purposes. They come there to buy things. They create and make their own supplies, cooking things and things like that. And so we formed a partnership with them because they have quite a lot of property. And we asked them if we could do a community garden on their property, because you might have noticed, while we have a lot of state park around our church, we don't really have, and ice cream, yes. We don't really have a lot of property in order to do a big community garden. And one of the things we wanted to do was reach out to the community, and Hillside Farms is a very good name in the community. So Hillside Farms very gracefully, next slide, gave us about 1/2 an acre. So this was last year that we had, we were given this 1/2 acre, and we have this small group of people who were doing things, but we really found that actually planting that last year was really too much for us. So we put down a cover crop and, you know, focused on doing our own internal, the canning and the growing of the tomatoes and getting people sort of focused on it. So this year project is this community garden. And this is quite a bit bigger than things that we've had in the past. We've decided to sort of split it up into 4 or 5 areas and try and have organizations come in rather than individual people and do it. Really what we're looking at is just taking a piece of it, maybe 1/4 of it, and planting it ourselves and seeing if we can come up with a schedule to keep it watered and maintained over the summer ourselves. I mean, we've never done anything like this. And we really don't want to burn each other out. And 1/2 an acre, I did not know, was a lot of land to be cultivating and growing crops on, especially with a small group of people. So we're in the planning process right now. The building down there, you can see it in the distance there, is an education center that they just built. And we've had meetings with master gardeners here in Northeast PA, and they're going to teach classes there. And our plan is to grow a crop this year and invite 1 or 2 organizations in. But we did hire a social media person to sort of advertise this. So I don't know if that's going to cause us all of a sudden to have a lot of people applying or not. We're just taking it step by step and trying to go as carefully forward as we can, because we don't want to get overwhelmed. Next slide. And of course, the building energy improvements were the big thing. I mean, this really was happening while we were doing all the planting and things like this. We did a fundraiser. I mean, that building is 150 years old. It was an old Methodist church. And we replaced the furnace with a gas boiler, high efficiency gas boiler, installed super efficient electric air-to-air heat pump system for heating and cooling. Services during the summer prior to this used to be very, very hot. The building used to get super hot inside. There was really nothing we could do, even with fans and things like that. Now it stays the same temperature all summer long and winter long. And we noticed that we have a great increase in the attendance. And of course, the installation of the solar array on the roof. Next slide. So there's our heating and cooling system on the side. And next slide. And this is our solar panels. So with the solar panels, and I've heard more about this now, there's a co-op up here, the Clean Energy Co-op, that, I mean, basically they own the solar panels and they lease our roof, is basically what's happening. And we have the reduced payments, and we do make a little bit of money off from the solar panels. I mean, this is really the first year that we've gone through it. This is the first winter we've had them there. It is financially beneficial to us to have these solar panels there. I'll just say it that way, as we're trying to figure things out and move forward with this. And then next slide. And the key behind all of this was to really get the word out. There are, like I said earlier, there are very few organizations doing things up here in Northeast PA. And we wanted to start celebrating it, get the word out, and let people know that we're up here and we're doing things and try and get them engaged and things like that. And so we had our Green Sanctuary celebration, and Katie actually came and spoke at that celebration. And it was very successful, and it was just the start. And many of us sat around and looked at it and said, now we've got work to do. And that's where we're at right now. We have a lot of things to do, but we're having a great time doing it, and it fits right in with our principles. So we are happy with where we're moving. I see questions coming. Should I answer them, or should I not answer questions?
We're gonna move into a time for Q&A, so we should be able to get to folks' questions in a moment here. Thank you, Brian. I'm gonna go ahead and stop my screen share then, so I can see everybody's lovely faces. I don't know about you all, but I find it so inspiring to hear both pieces. What it is about people's beliefs and communities of practice that inspires them to meet together and be together in the first place as a community. And then also to hear how that inspires care for each other and how we move through the world together. So thank you both for modeling how our faith communities, there's an integration of both of those wherever faith communities can be found. So I have seen a lot of questions come in through the chat. And so as I mentioned to folks as we were arriving here, the way we'll run Q&A today is if you can throw your question into the chat, our incredible tech team, who is Rainica today, will put them into a document for me. And so as our conversation is happening here, I will try to bring in those different questions that folks have as well. But I want to get started because Reverend Dr. K asked me to. Will you tell us a little bit more about jet pigs and what that means?
Yes. So this is Henrietta, and she is one of my friends here at church. She's a flying pig, and Henrietta is helping us. So one of the things that was a bit confusing, I know for some new people, is that Brian was talking about principles and I was talking about values. And that is because our association really is right in the middle of transitioning from what has been since the 1960s guiding principles, and we're reframing them, reimagining them into value statements. So that's why you're some confusing language. But I'll bring you back to this. This is our value statement that came out of our principles. JetPig is just my fun way of remembering these 6 areas. So JetPig is to help us, it's an acronym to help us remember justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. And in my church, we have a pig who has her own jetpack, her wings, very natural, as opposed to a powered pack that relies on fossil fuels. So that's our way of remembering our new resources, our new value statement. I offer that to my fellow UUs, Jet Pig, and you too can get your own flying pig to help you remember what those value statements are.
I love that. You have a mascot essentially, right?
Yep, we do.
That's wonderful. Well, we have some questions here, and so I'm going to bring these out. First of all, I want to send a shout out to Ruth Ann Purchase. It's been a while since I've seen you, and seeing your name pop up in the chat filled me with delight. I would love to reconnect with you, so I'm really glad you're here for this conversation. So
Hi, Rita too. Rita Verley's in here. There's so many people I haven't seen in a long time. Hey, everybody.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad. So Ruth had some questions for you, Brian. And so I'm going to put them together and then you can answer. So two questions are, have you tried indigenous foods on your half acre? She notes that once they're established, it's much easier than imported or industrialized food. And then also, can you post a link to the volunteer garden? So for that second question, I'll just add, we will send a follow-up email out. And so Brian, if you wanted to give me that link, I can also include it in the follow-up email for everyone.
Very nice. I do not think that at this point we have a link for our community garden. That's why we hired the social media person to expand that and to grow those things. And that's really going to be their focus right off. Yes, we're having these meetings right now because this is the time to plant, to do the seedlings and how we're going to go forward. Actually, our April 14th service we've decided is going to be at the Hillside Farms in the education facility itself. And we're going to have people there. We're going to give out free seeds and things like that. We have talked about the three sisters, the pros and the cons between each one of those. We are looking for crops, obviously, that require minimal amount of care. And I know the three sisters sort of take care of themselves, take care of each other in that process. So yeah, we're looking at a variety of crops. We are going to do the three sisters. There's no doubt about it. We did decide upon that, but we're also looking at other things as well to be growing there. I mean, it's going to be quite an experiment. I mean, obviously the problem is this last summer was very wet. And so not much watering would have had to have happened, but there's a real potential that the weeks are going to be very, very hot up there, and finding volunteers that can get into the garden during the weekdays. Weekends are fine, but during the weekdays is a challenge. Luckily, there are a few retired people that have weekday time. So I've sort of committed to being the weekday waterer and weeder.
That's awesome. So more questions that are technical for you, Brian. Wondering about water sources, which you mentioned not having been an issue this past summer, wondering if you anticipate it being a problem in the future. And then if you're also planning on fencing or other deer and critter deterrents. And also a question about how big your congregation actually is.
So we are 55 and growing. I mean, when I took over 3 years ago, we were in the 30s. The more that we're doing, the more that we get out, and I learned this the first time that that I was president, the more we get out there and get the word out that we're doing things and show people that we're active, the more people join us. And so we are growing, and it probably is more than that. We're in the middle of the stewardship campaign right now, so we'll see actually what the numbers are. Some of the water, they have a spigot, Hillside Farms. So it is it's an established farm. And so they have a spigot that is there. So we need to buy the hose and run that over. But yes, we have readily accessible water, which, people that want to do a community garden, this is a very, very good opportunity for them. And part of our concern was at our last meeting is that if we put the word out and then we have all of these people. And so again, keep it slow, try and move forward, try and get organizations rather than individual people to take little plots of land. We've already created the rules. The master gardener provided us all kinds of ideas and said, right up front, establish your rules so that people know what they're doing. And so was there another question?
I think those are it for now. We will circle around. Someone asked about solar, but I'm going to pin that for a moment because I actually want to direct a question towards Reverend Dr. Kate, and then Brian, also happy for you to answer it as well. But you talked a lot in your presentation about the shift from the principles towards the values and kind of setting some of the values that the community lives by. And so wondering if you wanted to take a moment to walk us through some of how these values create unique approaches for care and accountability within your tradition, particularly in the context of environmental justice, which continues to be something that is part of our tradition. I think one of the key things that our faith traditions can offer us is a connection between our care and love for the environment and the way we treat each other, that people and planet move together. So wondering if you want to just talk a little bit more about that, Reverend Dr. Kate, about how, from your perspective, the Unitarian Universalist tradition might offer us some tools to think about environmental justice.
Yeah. So one of the things that it makes us, I think, particularly strong is that a lot of faiths generally come with two lenses. One, and this is world religions and all faiths. One is that kind of focuses on the vertical relationship with the holy, the divine. And historically, that divine, that essence of God, has been a God who's transcendent and out there and other than. And theologically, we rejected that a long time ago. And we always have felt that God is within, God is immanent. And then as we entered in the 20th and 21st century, we started to even change that God language to be about the holy, the divine, that is which is sacred. And that relationship for us has been much more horizontal relationship. It's about community and strength, but it's also been recognized and strengthened through that interdependent web of existence, that it's not even just community, it's the whole web of existence. And this is a paradigm shift for a lot of people to recognize and live with that guiding value that we are all connected, each and every one of us at all times. And when you start to really make all of your life decisions, how we spend our resources, how do we talk to one another? What car do we drive? How do we, what groceries do we buy? What bank do we engage in? Everything we do, if we start to work on it from that value lens, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work. It takes a huge commitment. And can we truly do that? And then the next step, though, is then to also listen to the stories of those who have been historically marginalized. Because, and if you're going to do, as we used to say, we're about Earth Day, we're about the environment, and then a lot of our marginalized community says, hello, you're not listening. You're not listening to those who are being directly impacted. And those are the marginalized communities. And that's when we realize that intersectionality of climate or environment and justice work. And so it's a key piece when you're in community, you got to listen. You got to listen to those stories. So, for example, what is my church doing with that listening, that climate justice commitment is we are working directly with a community-based organizing, what we call is PIN, it's Pennsylvania Interfaith Network. And as you know, Katie, is a great organization, and we have been listening to the community down in the Mon Valley, the Monongahela Valley, which has incredible air issues. I mean, Pittsburgh is renowned for having incredible, awful air issues for the last 200 years. And people think, well, it's all cleaned up now. I'm like, not so much. It's still a huge impact in our area with very high rates, particularly for children, of lung issues, breathing issues, and from all sorts of physical health issues. And the Mon Valley is an area that has been traditionally marginalized community, particularly poor communities and the Black community. And so, how do we really help be an advocate, an ally, a support, bear witness, all of those ways? And that is for us living our faith. Yeah. Hope that helps to answer that question. It's a big question.
It really is. And I mean, we could talk about it all day, but I think that it's one of the pieces I always want to uplift from our faith traditions and what we contribute to climate conversations, because I think we're able to uniquely speak to that particular piece. Brian, I'm wondering, do you have anything you want to add, and maybe some of the reason why you thought about a community garden instead of just something that would just be more inward facing? Was there any particular reason that you felt called to that?
Well, the main goal, not just the main goal, but one of the goals is to build resilience within within church members, but also to reach out to the community and find a way to connect with people that really need to have it. I mean, to us, it's very important to develop these skills. And this year we know, so at least one of the crops that we're going to grow, we're thinking about pickles, is to learn how to, can different items other than just tomatoes and tomato sauce. So to us, it's, building community, building resilience within the congregation. And, I hate to say it, this year that's coming, providing a food source. We've talked about sharing it with the produce from, food pantries and things like that. I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows whether or not we're going to need it ourselves for food. So, yes.
Yeah, I often talk about faith communities as frontline responders to the climate crisis, and that being in the ways that we're creative, like creatively trying to reduce our impact on this common home that we share, but then also in like just being there to build resilient community, to build the kinds of adaptations that we need in the face of this world and this context that we live in. And so yeah, that's what I'm often known for saying, that we are frontline responders, because we know what community is, we know how to build it, we know how to keep it, and so we have something really critical to offer in this moment that we find ourselves living in. Helga, kind of along the lines of the community gardens, was wondering if you're right at the beginning of this project, right, of building community, but are there ways that you're seeing that happen already, or what do you see kind of happening over this new year?
So we've had many organizations say, oh, they love that idea and they would really like to do that. But as we are learning, it's really a process. Finding people that can do it, that can commit to it, come up with a schedule, knowing what to plan, when to plan it, how to take care of it, and do this. I mean, it really is significant. So we've had several organizations say that they would like to participate, and then they start learning what it entails, and they've backed out, which is fine. I mean, because we're really going through the process right now, and we want to have education as a core component of it. So, you know, being able to like maybe monthly have a class in that education building where people can just come up and, you know, see how to plant the seeds and, you know, when to do it and how to set up a little the lighting system in the houses and things like that. It is a large project, and people are willing to jump right into it, and then they jump right back out again once their feet get hot. So it's
be
our
truth
job
there.
to make it easier and to find a way to help them. And I think it would be easy to do it at this community garden. I mean, the only problem is it's, you know, 10 minutes out of the city again. So, you know, people are not going to be able, with limited transportation, there's nobody that's going to be able to use. So, you know, in our socio-economic justice efforts, it's not really a super win unless we can do food pantries and distribute the food downtown. There are community gardens in Wilkes-Barre that are in operation, very tiny things, and we are looking at connecting with them and being able to work with them in the future.
That's awesome. Donald in the chat was also just wondering more generally what Unitarian Universalist services typically look like. And so what I'll also share from having had the privilege of sitting in a couple at this point, and also getting to share at Brian's church as well, which was a special moment for me. I've noticed in my own experiences in UU spaces that there's a careful cultivating of the connection to the spiritual, but particularly how that shows up in nature within your services. So wondering if both of you want to share, because coming from a lay-led congregation and a minister-led congregation, there might be some differences too. So what do your services look like? And how do you integrate environmentalism or nature into those spaces?
Great question. And if you, Brian, sorry, my mouth just starts flapping, but I just jump right in. So I would say, and for my services, it kind of looks like a traditional Protestant service in that sense that there are hymns that we sing, there is a reading, there's a children's message before we send them off to religious education classes, and then there's either a sermon or a featured speaker and with as a full-time minister. That is me, and about 3/4 of the services, but we have guests as well. So and we have a choir that sings once a month and wonderful, incredible music program. So all of that is integrated into a weaving of inner reflection, and then a kind of hopefully a time when our spirits are renewed, but we're also charged and feel like we have a goal for the week of how we can live a better life, and be more in alignment with our values and our beliefs. So in terms of the commitment to nature, I would say it's integrated in how, for example, I open the service. I welcome everybody, we do announcements, and then I invite everybody to take a deep breath and feel grounded to one another and feel grounded to the earth, and to feel connected and to arrive in body and spirit. And that's just where it begins. And hopefully then people will feel both their spirits renewed and their hope deepened in each other. Yeah. Brian?
Very nice. So we are lay led. We do have a UU minister that regularly comes and speaks to us, but we also have a rabbi. We call him our rabbi, Rabbi Kaplan, who comes and speaks to us on a regular recurring basis. We do have regular recurring people. However, we have a committee that sits down and decides what it is that we want to emphasize this year, and where we want to go. Usually it is connected to holidays, all the different religions of the world, especially if they have representation within the church. We have speakers from all over the world. I mean, it is technology. This has really opened us up. We have people from Chicago, from California, that speak to us on all kinds of different topics. And our this last Sunday, we had a Native American man who brought in a gong, an enormous gong that, I mean, after speaking about his faith and where it comes from and his connectedness to nature. One of the things we always look for in the worship committee is every month we have some type of environmental connection as a speaker, whether or not it is a minister or just somebody that speaks to us. I mean, it was 10 minutes of meditation with this enormous gong. It was really fascinating. Anyway, so we have a wide variety. We're already out to June. We're working on July now for speakers. And so we're never at a loss for people who are willing to share with us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both for sharing about that. I want to circle back to a question that Leslie had, and there's a great conversation happening in the chat around other communities that have had a lot of success with community gardens and some very generous offers, Brian, to put you in touch with someone in a garden. So I'll let you take a look at those afterwards, and I can share those with you too. But Leslie was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit more about how you're working in the community to help others install solar and other energy saving measures. I know we've emphasized the community garden a lot here, but the solar project that you all did was also pretty impressive. So wondering if you want to just talk a little bit more about that or opportunities for others that you're hoping to build.
Well, as it turns out, this is exactly what we're doing right here is what we intended to do. You know, we did not know how to sell solar panels within the community and still really do not know. The co-op that we worked with is sort of a small thing, and they only have a few projects going at one time. What we wanted to do was advocate for it and talk to people about it and, you know, come on to these messages and say that it is possible. I will tell you something. The co-op that did our solar panels has had 3 or 4 congregations start and stop. It is, it can be challenging in order to do that. I mean, one of the problems, this is a 150-year-old building. Those panels were too heavy for the roof that was there. So we had to do a fundraiser within the church ourselves in order to replace the panels with metal sheets that we put up there and had to have done. There were just constant issues and challenges that we had to overcome, but we were committed, and we never backed down from that. And the other churches that this co-op has worked with have started to get into it, and people got wishy-washy, saw the expenses, and they've backed off from it. There are, I am starting to get connected to the funding that was recently, the legislation that was passed as the IRA legislation. I do not know, it does not seem that there are funding opportunities for churches in there for solar panels. You know, maybe.
I'll speak to that.
Good, if you
yes.
would, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, so we have geothermal in our building, and our primary building, there's sanctuary and offices, and then we have a RE wing, religious education wing, where our solar panels are located. We were able to purchase those through a solar panel company, and they were able to take advantage of the tax breaks and funding from the government and then they simply lease it back to us for an X amount of time, and then the panels revert back to us after that amount of time. So you don't, there are great intermediaries that make it possible for our religious organizations to do it. And because of the limited amount of space, I think the total investment for us was $70,000 to put the solar panels on. But the great news was that the company that installed them, they took responsibility for making the installation, and they will take care of the maintenance. And also, it really made it quite easy. Unfortunately, on the bad news is that the raccoons discovered that there's new shading for them on our roof. We had to limit their access points. And I see somebody has said there are tax credits for churches. Yes, I thought there was, but
Yes.
if you don't want to take responsibility for the installation, you can go through an intermediary
Yes.
organizations. And I think the company we were working with is out of West Virginia.
Yeah, and we don't have time or space to cover that here, but this is a plug to get involved with the work of PAIPO more generally. We're available via email if your congregation has questions about this, and are really actively working to help spread the word about the Inflation Reduction Act and particularly the direct pay benefit that's available to congregations. So I'm happy to talk with people if this is something that catches your interest. Reverend Dr. Kate, someone also was just asking how many people are involved in the UU community out in Pittsburgh with you.
Yeah, this church, we have about 250 members, actual members, and another 50 close friends, another 50 affiliated friends, you might say. So I'm serving a congregation of about 350, 250 are actual pledging members.
That sounds to me like you're pretty busy, so thanks for taking some time apart to be with us today.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And as it was noted, there are 5 churches in the Pittsburgh area. There's another one called Sunny Hill. It's in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, and there's one in the North Hills. All 3 of those are larger churches that also have full-time ministers. And then one is downtown, and another one out in the suburbs in the eastern part in Murraysville.
Wonderful. I also saw someone commented in the chat about squash, and I'll just say that my partner and I planted our first garden in our home last summer, and we also experienced the same thing with squash. So squash is a wonderful. We ended up with so much squash we were giving it to neighbors and friends and taking some to church. So if you're looking for an easy crop that will just keep producing, squash is a great option. We are running out of time, friends, which I'm always shocked by how quickly we arrive at the end of the hour. Thank you to both of our panelists today. We can give them like a virtual round of applause for both of them. And I also just want to take a moment, Reverend Joan from Unitarian Universalist Justice of PA. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm so delighted that you're here with us. And so maybe do you want to just take a moment to tell folks about the work of UU Justice PA and just a little bit about that, because maybe not everyone here is familiar with all of you.
Always ready to do that. UU Justice PA is a faith-based statewide organization. We represent all 35, 37, depending who's counting, congregations across the state, and at about 5,000 individuals claim themselves as Unitarian Universalists, self-claim. We now have 7 justice teams. We have criminal justice reform, economic justice, environmental justice, which of course brings us here, good government. I should know these by heart. Who am I forgetting? Good government, reproductive justice, and now we just started LGBTQIA+. We had a team that focused on those issues when I first started 5 years ago, but after the Marriage Equality Act, for some reason that the energies, people thought things are okay, right? Just like Mon Valley, the air is better. No, it's not. And so we are reorganizing that team this month, February 5th. So each team meets once a month for an hour, and some teams bring in guest speakers. Some are really good about following the legislation that's going through the Pennsylvania General Assembly regarding all of our issues. I live about a mile from the Capitol. I'm there regularly. I wear my yellow side with Love Stole. And so people recognize me now as the lady with the yellow stole. And so our goal is to have a presence in the Capitol, for us to train our UUs to go and talk to their legislators, both locally and in the Capitol. And we have more and more people doing that, which we think is good thing. So uujusticepa.org, check us out if you'd like. I see several UUs on this call, so thank you for being here.
Yeah, we have quite a good turnout from the UU community today, so thank you for being here. I really appreciate each and every one of you. A couple of final things before we all part ways for today. We will continue with the last installment of this series, hopefully not the last of this program, but the last of this series next month, March 7th, 12 p.m. We'll be highlighting the Buddhist tradition, and so please, the registration link will be available soon, so I hope that you will consider joining us. I think we've had some folks who've been with us throughout this entire program, so you know who you are. Thank you to those who have taken this journey with us. If you haven't taken the journey and would like to watch previous recordings, they are all available on our website. I will drop the link into the chat, and so you can watch those on your own time and leisure. We've covered the Christian tradition, the Jewish tradition, the Islamic tradition, the Baha'i tradition, and today Unitarian Universalist, next month Buddhist. Certainly not done, and certainly we can't comprehensively cover them in an hour. So if this program has brought meaning to you, please consider continuing to support us in this work as we try to identify funding and ways to continue developing programming like this. Your generosity is certainly appreciated, and you can give online to us at the link in the chat. One of the ways that people can actually support us is by becoming part of our membership. So people may not know this about us, but we are actually a membership-based organization. So we offer opportunities for congregations and also for individuals. And so a way that you can support our work and also be involved in some of our decision-making and helping us set our own priorities is by becoming part of our membership. And so I'll also drop a link in there if you're interested in learning how your congregation can get more involved, or if you just as an individual would like to be part of a statewide interfaith network that is working together to imagine solutions to the current times that we find ourselves living in. And yeah, with that, I just want to say thank you to each of you for being here today. Thank you for this conversation. Once again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Reinika for helping to provide our tech. I am dropping links in the chat. And so I trust that each of you will enjoy the rest of your day. We'll continue sitting with these conversations, thinking about how both the values that we hold and the way that they manifest out into our communities really matter. And we have important work to contribute as people of faith and conscience right here in Pennsylvania that can really make a difference. So thank you, everyone.